This is the first shark to be caught in the Cull off Western Australia.
Dingoes linked to the death of a Canadian tourist in Gari have been destroyed, with more still to be culled in the coming days.
We will roll out the biggest feral pest eradication program in our state's history.
Because of a number of recent animal attacks in the news lately, the debate around animal culling has again swelled up. You might have heard headlines like dingoes culled on Gari or shark cull planned in New South Wales. And you might have thought to yourself, hang on, wait, why are we killing all these animals? Animal culling is one of the most divisive wildlife issues there is. Some see it as a necessary step towards conservation, while others see it as cruel and unnecessary punishment. So today, let's break down all the key reasons people are for or against culling, because the truth, well, it's probably a lot more complicated than you'd expect. First off, a quick definition. What is an animal cull? Well, animal culling is the deliberate killing of individuals of a species in order to control or reduce their population size. This can involve native animals, invasive species, or animals that are deemed threatening to human safety. And it usually happens for a few different reasons. These reasons could include trying to protect people, trying to protect livestock or property, or controlling overpopulation. But whether animal culling is ever justified, well, that really depends on who you talk to. Let's start off with the people who are in favor of animal culling. Supporters of this practice tend to view it as a necessary tool, something that shouldn't be taken lightly, but used when necessary. There's about 4 main reasons why people might support an animal cull, and we're going to talk about all of them, beginning with protecting human lives and livelihood. One of the biggest arguments is actually quite simple. Human safety comes first. When animals attack people, livestock, or spread diseases, culling is sometimes seen as the most effective way to stop the destruction quickly. Some examples include when sharks attack people near popular beaches, when wild boars destroy farmland, or when animals become aggressive in urban areas. This could include domestic or feral dogs, or even bears, depending on where you live. Supporters argue that doing nothing puts more lives at risk. Another reason people are pro-culling is to control invasive species. In many countries, animals that have been introduced by humans have gone on to cause major ecological disruptions. A few examples include rabbits in Australia, feral cats killing native birds, like what happens in Australia, and cane toads, also in Australia. We seem to have a bit of a problem here. A well-known example that's not from Australia is that of the brown rats on South Georgia Island. Now, South Georgia Island, it's not in the state of Georgia, nor is it in the country of Georgia, confusingly. It's actually a small island in the Atlantic that was controlled by the British. Now, rats were introduced to the island by ships in the 1700s and went on to decimate populations of seabirds on the island. Many species of seabirds on the island nested on the ground and evolved that way because they had no natural predators on the island. Because of these nests being on the ground, the rats went on to devastate the population by feasting on the eggs and the chicks of these birds. This caused serious population decline for many species of birds. In response, conservationists launched one of the largest eradications of rats in history. Between 2011 and 2015, they used helicopters to drop bait and lure rats into traps. The results were dramatic and effective. Seabird populations rebounded. Native species like the South Georgia pipit returned to areas that they hadn't lived in years. And by 2018, the island was officially declared rat-free. Supporters see this as a clear case where removing an invasive animal species helped protect the native species and stop them from disappearing entirely. In these cases, culling isn't framed as animal cruelty, but as a necessary step to prevent native species from going extinct. Another reason people might support a cull is to prevent overpopulation and starvation. Sometimes, animal populations can grow out of control and beyond what the natural environment can support. If predators are removed or if habitats shrink, then other animal species populations can skyrocket, causing untold consequences. This can lead to things like starvation, disease outbreak, and habitat loss. Supporters argue that culling one animal species can prevent more destruction down the line. And finally, we come to conservation itself, the conservational trade-off. Sometimes, wildlife managers have to cull one animal in order to save another. An example is culling deers. When you cull a deer population, the forest is able to regrow, and this in turn supports the native insect or bird populations as well as any other animals that live in the forest. Supporters of culls say that sometimes conservationists need to make hard choices, and culling, well, that's just one of those choices. But now let's look at the other side of the argument. Of course, there are people who are against culling. These people see culling as cruel, arbitrary, and inefficient ways to protect the environment. They often view it as ethically wrong, ecologically risky, and sometimes completely unnecessary. Now, the first and foremost argument here, it's an emotional one, but it is a valid one, and it's an ethics problem, that killing healthy animals is morally wrong. Opponents of culling say that animals are sentient beings. They're not pests, and they're certainly not numbers on a spreadsheet that need to be deleted. And many times, human intervention is what's caused the problem in the first place. Opponents argue, why should animals pay the price for human mistakes? The second argument, to me, is a stronger argument, and that is that culling doesn't really fix the root problem. Critics often say that culling is a short-term fix, because the real issues are issues like habitat loss, climate change, overfeeding of certain animal populations, and urban expansion. If these problems remain, then the conflict will just return. So opponents argue that culling, well, maybe it treats the symptom, but it doesn't even get close to curing the disease. Another reason that people are against culling is that oftentimes it can backfire ecologically. Ecosystems are incredibly complicated, and removing one animal species from the equation can have untold consequences. For example, removing a predator animal can cause prey animals to explode in population. Breaking up packs of animals can actually cause individual animals to become far more aggressive and dangerous. And populations of animals can rebound quickly anyway. This is an effect known as the vacuum effect. In some cases, culling doesn't even work long term. For much of the 19th and 20th century, wolves were hunted and culled in the United States quite heavily because they were viewed as a dangerous animal, not just to humans, but also to livestock. By the mid-1900s, wolf populations were largely eradicated from places like Yellowstone National Park. Now, at first, this seemed like a huge success. Less dangerous animals, a safer environment for everyone. But ecologically, this triggered a chain reaction. Without wolves there to control them, the elk population suddenly exploded. The elk began overgrazing on huge areas of vegetation, particularly young willow and aspen trees. That overgrazing affected other species. Beavers were no longer able to get the wood that they needed to build their dams. Bird populations declined as habitats were shrinking. And riverbanks actually eroded because there was no vegetation to hold them together. So instead of creating a healthier environment, removing the apex predator actually caused wide-told ecological change and imbalance. This is now considered one of the best known examples of trophic cascade, where culling of one species disrupts the entire food chain. Wolves were eventually reintroduced in the 1900s, and many parts of the ecosystem began recovering, although this reintroduction did cause problems for farmers, which we will cover in a future episode. Another reason people are against culling is the fact that non-lethal alternatives do exist. Many opponents believe we should always use non-lethal and non-violent alternatives, including relocation, fertility control, better fencing, deterrence, and smarter land management. They believe that culling is often selected as the method because it's cheaper and easier, not because it's the ethical or correct solution. And finally, there's public outcry. Certain animals carry huge cultural and emotional importance to us. Now, I'm sure most people can overlook the cull of a rat population on an island somewhere because no one really views a rat as an emotional or culturally important animal. But when you're in Australia and they start talking about a kangaroo cull, or if you're in America and they want to talk about culling the bears, or if you're in India and they want to cull the leopards or the tigers, these animals have huge cultural and emotional importance to a lot of people. So when a cull happens, people feel it deeply. Now this can create massive backlash, protest, and an even bigger problem is it causes mistrust in our local wildlife experts. So what does this all come down to, really? Well, at its heart, the animal culling debate is about competing values. Human safety versus animal rights. Ecosystem management versus individual lives. Short-term solution versus long-term accountability and responsibility. Both sides more or less want the same outcomes. We want healthier ecosystems, we want less suffering, and we want less conflict between humans and animals. People just seem to disagree on how to get there. So my question to you is, what do you think? Is culling sometimes a necessary evil, or is it an outdated and unethical solution? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this particular issue. And if you want more videos about wildlife conflict, animals eating people, make sure you subscribe to this channel and also check out the Man Eaters podcast wherever you can get your podcasts. Make sure you subscribe, like, do all that other stuff, and I'll see you next time, gang. Toodaloo.